Thanks to my producer Charlie Drever, Lisa Owen with Checkpoint next. Stay there.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. Commuter chaos. The Auckland Harbour Bridge is backed up after high winds force lane closures and make it a no-go zone for buses. Some ferries are cancelled too. A woman has died after being crushed by an oak tree toppled in freakish winds in Cambridge. Down country in Levin, locals also describe a tornado tearing up the town. A bunch of the country's greens come from there, the ones you eat, so what's left of the crops after hail the size of golf balls. The Huru Whenua Mayor and a grower join us live. We talk to people who literally cannot wait for Farm Act to decide what drugs to buy with its funding boost. And giddy up, why Mate's white horse on the hill gets a spit and polish.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Marie, I'm Evie Ashton. A freak fatal accident in Cambridge this morning has shocked people in the Waikato town. A woman died after being critically injured when she was pinned under a falling tree during wild weather. Lydia Lewis reports.
Emergency services rushed to Victoria Square at about 10 o'clock and spent half an hour freeing the woman. She was taken to Waikato Hospital but later died. A woman who works at a cafe near Victoria Square says she cannot believe such a tragic event has happened. Locals say what seemed to be a series of mini tornadoes tore through the town, bringing down trees and power lines. The 80-year-old oak is being removed by council contractors.
6 properties in Levin were severely damaged and dozens of homes and businesses were affected by an apparent tornado that ripped through the Huru Whenua town this morning. Ruth Hill reports.
Locals say the tornado came from the direction of Hokio Beach just after 6 o'clock and cut a swathe of destruction across Market Gardens before tearing a wide strip through the middle of the town itself. It lifted roofs, downed trees, fences and power lines and left debris scattered across roads. One person suffered minor injuries from broken glass, but miraculously no one was seriously injured. The Huru Whenua District Council says a welfare support centre has had 10 calls for assistance and accommodation.
A mayoral relief fund has been set up for Levin, with central government and the district council contributing $100,000 each. The Finance Minister says it's not unusual for the government to disagree with Treasury advice. It's emerged the centrepiece of this year's budget, a one-off payment of $350 for those who earn less than $70,000, was not supported by Treasury. Officials warned the government earlier this month against the idea, saying it would add to short-term inflationary pressures. Grant Robertson says he didn't agree with that advice.
We thought that this was a targeted and temporary way of ensuring that more New Zealanders got cost of living support. We've got 81% of working age New Zealanders being supported for their cost of living pressures through this period of time.
A 14-year-old Southern Hawke's Bay girl says carbon forestry is starting to destroy her small town. Sophie Stoddart from Pōrangaho was one of nearly 100 protesters who took to Napier's streets today, angry at the amount of forestry conversion. She says it's absolutely tragic for towns like hers.
Pōrangaho is like a really small rural community and it just won't run well. Farms provide everything for us at Pōrangaho. And it's just a really special place.
Protesters left their placards on the steps of the office of local MP and Forestry Minister Stuart Nash. Cases of monkeypox are now being investigated in several European countries, as well as the UK and the US, and there's a probable case in Australia too. Virologist Gemma Geoghegan says it's rare to see a wider transmission of the virus.
Very unusual that there are now multiple countries across continents that have been linked to this outbreak, and the fact that there are people that have been infected that don't have any history of people with contact to the original case suggests that it could be transmitting quite cryptically as well.
Gemma Geoghegan says the current vaccine for monkeypox should be strong enough to prevent a bigger outbreak. Thames Coromandel Mayor Sandra Gowdy is reportedly standing down at this year's local body elections. Ms Gowdy sparked controversy last year when she declined to have the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccination. She later said she wouldn't get Novavax either and has spoken out against vaccine mandates. And the Auckland Harbour Bridge has been closed to all buses because of high winds. Only 4 lanes are open to other traffic with a speed limit of 30. Several ferry services have also been cancelled. To sport, and javelin thrower Tori Peters has shaken off the disappointment of missing out on the Tokyo Olympics and is celebrating her selection for the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. She's one of 15 athletes named today in the track and field squad. Peters says the past couple of years have been challenging, so it was pleasing to have some good news to share with her family.
It's very emotional, and I think they've seen the hard work and the graft that you put in over, year after year, and they've been by my side through all the disappointments and setbacks. So it'll be really nice for them to be there and to be watching me.
Crusaders and All Blacks wing Sevu Reece is looking forward to taking on the Fijian Ndrua in Christchurch tonight, but concedes it would be more special if his brother Cyril was there. Reece grew up in Fiji and has played alongside most of the Ndrua side previously. Older brother Cyril played for the Ndrua last year, but isn't there this year.
He just stopped playing because he just had a little baby. Been missing him every time now, and I told him, oh man, I could have been playing against you.
Rory McIlroy has a one-shot lead after the opening round of the US PGA Championship in Oklahoma, carding a 5-under par 65. New Zealand's Ryan Fox is 5 shots back. And Dame Lisa Carrington will return to international competition tonight for the first time since winning her 3 Tokyo Olympic gold medals, lining up in the Canoe World Cup regatta in the Czech Republic. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, the 21st century doesn't seem to be going so well. Helen Thompson takes a broad look at what's gone wrong in her book Disorder. Artist Dame Robin White, on her remarkable career in this and other Pacific islands, she taught us to look at where we are. And US writer Mary Gateskill has a collection of essays which are, of course, trenchant and sometimes shocking. Call Kim Hillaho tomorrow from 8 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday from Northland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers with scattered thunderstorms in the north and west, easing this evening. Gales in exposed places in these regions and also for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. A few showers in Te Tairāwhiti clearing this evening and becoming fine. Wellington and Wairarapa showers, some heavy with hail, clearing by this evening. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from a possible shower around midday. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy with hail, becoming fine in Westland tomorrow. For Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Central and North Otago, scattered showers, some heavy, clearing from the south this afternoon and evening. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from 1 or 2 showers. For the remainder of Otago and for Southland, showers, some heavy with hail, snow to about 500 metres. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, showers with possible thunderstorms from this evening with a gale southwest change. It's 7 minutes past 5. Next, you're with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It was a frightening and fatal start to Friday due to freakish weather. A woman is dead after being crushed by a tree in Cambridge. Levin's been battered by what locals call a tornado, and golf-sized hail and thousands of lightning strikes lashed parts of the Motu. But first tonight, it's been the long, long way home for many Auckland commuters, especially those trying to get to the North Shore, as the super city has been experiencing super strong winds. There's been restrictions on the Harbour Bridge, and adding to the challenge to get home, ferry sailings have been, well, on again, off again. So for the latest, we're joined by Nick Truebridge, who is near the Harbour Bridge. Kia ora, Nick. What's the situation there now?
Hi Lisa, well your timing is absolutely immaculate, I've got to say, because just as you've come to us, it appears as though, as a man walks past with a lovely Labrador there, it appears as though the Harbour Bridge has just opened. The trucks that were pushing all of the traffic to 1 lane only, or 2 lanes only each way, have just been removed, so traffic is flowing. But there's a backstory here, of course. It didn't open before before it opened, there was a hell of a lot of chaos on the roads in Auckland. Traffic has been backed up to around about Spaghetti Junction. That's kilometres down the road from the Harbour Bridge up until about a few minutes ago. And to make matters worse, there was a traffic breakdown on the tunnel in the lead up to the Harbour Bridge as well. As for the latest situation, well, up until about 5 minutes ago, there were no buses allowed on the Harbour Bridge because of those winds. You ask how strong are those winds? Well, Met Service has been reporting gusts of up to 80 kilometres an hour on the Harbour Bridge. It looks like buses are now allowed on, unless a naughty bus driver snuck through, because I did see one just come through. Let's hope he's supposed to be there. And you mentioned the ferries as well. There's been on again, off again ferries all afternoon. The latest update we had was that Birkenhead, Bayswater, Pine Harbour and Devonport were cancelled, but we've just heard in the last couple of minutes that they're now back on. They may be off again later on tonight. Let's just see. But if Marika just pans back to the shot that we started on there, for those of you who aren't watching at home, traffic is still pretty backed up in Auckland heading north over the Harbour Bridge. It's 4 lanes across, as I said, backed all the way back up to Spaghetti Junction, and there will still be some delays. Earlier we heard from Auckland Transport saying if you are getting public transport home, the route to take is Britomart to Henderson, that's on the train, and then from Henderson, bus to Consolation Drive. Now, of course, that advice, now that traffic's flowing, has just changed. If you were to take that trip, this is the advice, but that's a 2-hour ride home. So if that's the way you're going to go, well, you're in for a long journey. But as I say, Lisa, things slowly starting to return to normal after a fairly chaotic afternoon, you'd have to say.
Thanks, Nick. That is Nick Trubridge there with the latest on the Harbour Bridge. Advice to you would be to check out AT's advice on their website to see what the latest is. As Nick says, the bridge appears to be flowing a bit more with some extra lanes open there, but to get the latest, go online. Levin has been left to deal with a trail of destruction after a wild storm ripped through the town this morning. Roofs lifted off, homes, debris scattered, schools closed and power lines left dangling on the road. Reporter Ruth Hill and cameraman Angus Drever have the story.
These residents in Goldsmith Crescent got the worst kind of wake-up call this morning as what they're describing as a tornado tore down the street. Ben says the neighbour's trampoline flew the length of the road.
I was literally flying. It was pretty funny. A massive tornado formed right here too. It's bigger than the house.
Across the road, Nick and Elizabeth Thorne have had their garden flattened and their shed ripped off its foundations, with bits of it ending up buried in another neighbour's conservatory.
All of a sudden there was a terrific rumble outside. It was as though it was a thunderstorm right beside my window. And I thought, what the heck's that? That was the wake-up call.
Mr Thorne is relieved the damage isn't worse.
We've had a few of the roof tiles were lifted. Little bit of damage to this veranda, such as right over there, big hole in the roof. And I don't know if you'd like to see it, but one of the supports on the carport there are totally gone, and unfortunately, the car was parked right beside it, so a bit of damage to the car as well.
Horowhenua District Council says up to 50 homes have been damaged, with further impact to fences, trees, power lines and other property. Many have lost at least part of their roof, and the rain has poured in the holes, damaging possessions. Welfare officers are working to secure accommodation for people who have had to abandon their homes. The main road through town was closed for the morning because of fallen trees. Several of the 130-year-old oak trees that line the road at Levin Adventure Park have been damaged, with some toppled completely, exposing their roots as if plucked from the earth by a giant hand. Others are just snapped off at the trunk and broken branches litter the road. Akash Solanki owns a dairy opposite the park.
I opened the shop about 6 o'clock, and after 10 minutes or 10-15 minutes, I hear the sound, the wind was blowing too hard and all the leaves coming inside the store. And I just go and look outside, all the trees on the road. And one of the truck was stuck between the two trees.
There are a couple of smashed windows and loose roofing in nearby buildings, but the full scale of the damage is only visible at the rear. The office of local Labour MP Teresa Ngobi has had its entire back wall sheared off and the rooms exposed like a doll's house. The corrugated iron roof of the recycling centre next door has peeled off in sections, with some gone and others still flapping. Clean-up crews have been busy everywhere, cutting away branches, securing roofs, dealing with broken power lines trailing on the ground. Kerry Kirk and her colleague from Bunnings in Petone arrived with a truckload of supplies.
So we found out about the tornado that came through and all the destruction, and so we decided to donate a whole bunch of items, just emergency stuff, so tarpaulins and plywood and a whole bunch of stuff. That's why we've got the truck here.
Kerry is from Levin.
One of my best friends, her windows are smashed, the whole fence ripped out, the car's ruined, and it got blown onto the road. That's how crazy it was, yeah.
It's also been devastating for growers. Long-time Oho market gardener Gordon Sue says the damage will set them back 3 months at least.
Tornado was it wasn't long. Wouldn't be a couple of minutes. Went through pretty quick. Sounds like a long time.
The greenhouse has been torn apart and thousands of seedlings flattened. As for the crops in the field, they've been shredded by hail.
6:15, I think it was, just after 6. My wife said, "What's going on the roof?" I said, "Oh, bloody cats are running around on it." And it wasn't the cats, it was just sounded like someone throwing rocks all over the roof. That went for quite a while. Shredded all the plants up there all around the house. Look, we've got a lot of flowers and they're just gone.
It's not yet known how much the damage is going to cost, but Mr. Sue says you can be sure we're all going to end up paying more for vegetables.
If you were listening to that report on radio, we'll put the video version on our website. And the Horowhenua District Mayor, Bernie Wandin, is with us now. Kia ora, Bernie.
Kia ora.
Hey, I imagine you've been out surveying the damage. What have you seen today?
Look, it hasn't been pretty, to be honest. These sorts of events, unfortunately, have no way. You don't realise the damage that they can cause in such a short space of time and in a short distance. And so, look, it hasn't been great.
So what struck you the most?
Oh, just the devastation of a lot of properties, a lot of trees down, and just obviously what must have been an incredible force that caused that situation. I mean, it's incredible to see trees uprooted that have been on the ground for many, many years, to see them suddenly lying around. But also, look, my thoughts are obviously with those property owners that have been devastated by the impact on their homes. I know how crucial it is that they have a safe and secure home. So to have these sorts of things happen is not nice.
Bernie, how many people do you reckon are out of their houses tonight because of damage?
Well, I'm not sure exactly the number of people, but we know that we've got at least 10 homes that are uninhabitable tonight, and obviously we're finding alternative accommodation for them. Plus there's about 30 more that have sustained some significant damage, but we believe that they are still okay to be lived in at the moment. Obviously, the challenge around finding accommodation for those people and also then getting on to the repairs and the resources required for that will be also a challenge.
How widespread is the damage? Was it concentrated in a specific area, or what can you tell us about that?
So it was concentrated in a reasonably specific area. So it started to the west of the town, just across the road from the APNI showgrounds, and then pathed across a school and our adventure park in Levin, and then across the state highway onto some urban areas of town. So it was only probably about 100 metres wide and only about a kilometre long in the end, but, left quite a level of destruction along the way.
I see the government's kicked in, $100,000 into the Mayoral Relief Fund. How far is that going to go?
Well, Council obviously has matched that as well, so we have a start of $200,000 for that Mayoral Relief Fund. Look, we know that there will be people in our neighbourhoods that don't have the necessary insurance cover. We aren't exactly we have some low socioeconomic areas, and some of them have been hit hard in this place. So look, we would encourage those that can afford to donate to that Mayoral Relief Fund to do so. Look, we want to support our community the best way we can. And look, I've been really encouraged and thankful and grateful for the number of people that have stepped up today to do so.
Some of your schools got a bit of a pounding. Do you know whether they're going to be able to open on Monday?
So most of the schools will be able to open except the Catholic school, St Joseph's, which was in the path of this, and they lost a lot of windows. So they have already said that they're unlikely to be open until Tuesday. But the rest of them, we hope, will be able to open on Monday.
And no power was a bit of an issue earlier in the day. Is everybody back on electricity?
The last I heard, there were only pockets left of power not connected. But, you know, again, the electric company did a fantastic job in those first few hours in restoring most households in a very short space of time.
What about infrastructure like roads?
So we've had enough rain over the just last weekend, which caused a number of slips, as it was anyway. Fortunately, today's event hasn't been a significant rain event, other than the hail episode as well, which you've just been talking about. But as long as we don't get too much more rain over the weekend, we should be okay. Look, our water treatment plants and other infrastructure have struggled a little bit with the amount of rain that we've had over the last week.
Bernie, did you know to expect this? Did you know to expect it to be this bad?
I certainly didn't know to expect it. This is a very random occurrence for our town. We never usually experience anything like this. So it was impossible to prepare for, and has come completely out of the blue.
Just going back to the mayoral fund, right?
Yep.
And as you say, you've kicked in the same amount as has the government. Any idea at this stage what your clean-up's going to cost you?
Not really. No, look, we've had a team out this afternoon assessing certainly the worst places, but it will take a little bit of time to understand the total cost for this, but I suspect it will be reasonably high.
And the other thing, Bernie, you got a few houses that you say, some are uninhabitable, some are going to need quite the repair job. And we know that, well, construction is pretty pressed at the time. Are people going to be able to get the help they need there?
I would hope so. Look, I'm sure that, we've already seen the contribution made from a few merchants in that space that have been donating goods and things like that. I'm pretty confident that there will be the resources, available to make sure that these people can get back into their homes as soon as possible.
Best of luck, Bernie. Thank you for joining us. That is Bernie Wandin, who is the Horowhenua District Mayor there. It is 21 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You are listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A woman has died after being crushed by a falling tree that she was sheltering under during a freakish storm in the Waikato town of Cambridge. The oak toppled in high winds this morning. Arborists have since inspected its roots and confirmed it was a healthy tree. Waipa District Council's Sally Sheedy explains what happened.
So we had an incident that occurred at Victoria Square in Cambridge. At the time, we had a freakishly high wind come through that's been described as a mini tornado. So we had a weather event come through and a large pin oak tree within Victoria Square fell in this wind. And unfortunately, there was a lady who was sheltering behind this tree from the weather event that came through at the time.
That is absolutely terrible. So she was trapped under the tree, was she, when it fell?
My understanding is yes. It's a dreadful freak accident that has occurred in our park today, and a very tragic accident with a terrible outcome.
Do you know if there were other people with her at the time, Sally?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that.
So for people who don't know the area, can you describe Victoria Square? Is it a park? Are there lots of trees?
Victoria Square is off Victoria Street in Cambridge. It's opposite our world-famous town hall. And it is a square that we have a cricket ground on, and there are regular events held there. There are also trees around, and Cambridge is known as the town of trees.
So this particular tree, it is of a significant size?
The tree, we believe, is over 80 years old, so it was planted some time ago. It was a pin oak, which do grow into larger trees, and it was 80 years old, as I'm aware.
So, Sally, has the force of the wind been enough to pull it out at its roots, or is this a situation where part of the tree has broken off?
No, the whole tree was lifted, so its root ball was lifted through these winds.
Do you have any information about who found this woman and who got help for her?
So we did have some park staff who are on the other side of Victoria Square. We also received phone calls in from people because opposite the road, opposite Victoria Square, is some commercial residence or premises. So people called it in, and emergency services responded very quickly to the incident.
Given the size of the tree, was there anything wrong with it for it to be sort of pulled out of the ground?
No, there wasn't. The tree recently had regular maintenance completed in early April, and we were unaware of there's no previous concerns had been raised around the tree. Subsequently, the arborists have inspected the tree and confirmed that the roots were healthy, but it doesn't detract from the fact that this is a dreadful freak accident, and Council would like to pass on our condolences to the family. We are shocked about what has happened today, and I'm sure our community is as well.
Sally, do you know if this woman was a local and whether her family lives locally?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. No, I'm sorry, I don't. But I do understand if somebody was walking and sheltering that they most probably are a local and do live locally, but I don't have any further details.
You mentioned that the arborists have taken a look at this tree following what happened. Have other trees in the area been checked out to make sure they're safe right now as well?
Yes, this weather event has obviously come through Cambridge, and so arborists have checked other trees and will monitor trees as well. Obviously, we weren't expecting this type of event, so they will check those, yes.
And has the tree that fell, has that been removed?
Yes, it has.
So were you warned that a storm like this was coming? Did you know?
We understood that there was weather watches in place for further north in terms of the weather that was coming up the country today. But in terms of for Waipa, this very much seems to be freakishly high winds, and people have identified it as a mini tornado came through.
So, Sally, was there much damage done in other areas?
My understanding is there was responses to other localised areas, but I'm not aware of any wide-strain sort of damage that was occurred.
And that was Sally Sheedy from Waipa District Council. The government says making public transport half price would cost $250 million a year. As part of the budget, the policy's been extended permanently for community service card holders, but only until August for everyone else. The Transport Minister says it's all about balance, and it isn't the only way to drive people onto buses and trains. Our political reporter Giles Dexter has more.
Extending half-price public transport fares was one of the budget's worst-kept secrets. The government could have announced it along with the emissions reduction plan on Monday. Instead, it wrapped it into its cost of living sweetener yesterday. After all that teasing, it's left the Public Transport Users Association underwhelmed.
We need to make a massive dent into emissions, obviously, as announced the other day, but also we just need to get people out of their private vehicles.
John Reeves isn't the only one. Local Government New Zealand says it should have been extended at least until the end of the year. CEO Susan Freeman-Green wants some conversations between local and central government on how to fund it further.
That's the challenge of only having it for 2 months, is we've missed the opportunity, theoretically, to have that conversation while we've got people incentivised to use public transport. Not too late, however. We'd be really keen to have that conversation now, and obviously we would like to see an extension for longer.
Nearly 2 months into the scheme, and bus drivers are noticing a difference.
I have at peak hour, certainly, very large numbers there, with capacity almost not enough.
This morning, the Transport Minister was touring Transit's Rongotai bus depot, bigging up plans to decarbonise the fleet and highlighting the emissions reduction plan's $61 million fund to hire more drivers and pay them better. He says making the half-price fees permanent or even making them free isn't the only thing that would boost patronage.
If you've got relatively cheap fares but you've got no good, accessible, frequent bus route in your community, the fact that fares are lower isn't going to help you at all. So we've got to balance the investment across affordable fares, across good routes.
Standing right next to him, the Climate Change Minister admitted he wanted more. The Green Party has long campaigned on making it free.
Yes, we want to go further than that, and we think that there's room to do that. We'll continue to push for that, but ultimately we're delighted that something that we've campaigned on for so long is now starting to happen.
That's something the public could get on board with.
Free would be ideal, but certainly permanent for people on benefits and things, and half price would be good for everybody else.
I probably would have still taken the bus anyway, but it's definitely helpful, and I think for a lot of people it will be really, really helpful.
I know for sure half fares is going to make a difference for a whole bunch of people, but there are people who probably need to have free fares.
The longer the discount lasts, the more it'll feel like the norm, and once people get used to something, it's pretty hard to take it away. Making half-price fares permanent would cost $250 million a year.
$250 million I don't consider to be chump change. It would be a significant investment. We do know that affordable fares are important, but we do have to actually focus on what is going to make the difference. And we know that across the system, if we purely focus on one of those areas like affordable fares, it potentially is at the expense of other areas. So we've tried to take a balanced approach here.
Michael Wood isn't ruling out extending it in next year's budget. So public transport users, set your alarms. The countdown to Budget 2023 has already begun.
Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. What do you reckon? Half-price transport for everybody, for good? Or should we make it free? And the other thing is, if you're travelling home in Auckland, let us know how it's going. There had been earlier chaos on the bridge. High winds meant some of the lanes were closed, buses couldn't get across, and ferries have been a bit on again, off again. So let us know what it's like out there at the moment. And if you experienced any of that weather earlier in the day, let us know what that was like too. Text me, Pātui Mai, 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And a quick update, if you've been trying to watch us on Sky Channel 83, we're not on there on Friday nights at the moment, but you can still watch us on the RNZ Checkpoint page, on our Facebook page, on YouTube and Freeview Channel 50. All the choices. Kia ora, e te iwi e Hairiaki nei e a Checkpoint. Hail the size of golf balls, pound some veggie crops. So what does that mean for your stir fry? We head to Oz as it counts down to election day. And Waimate's white horse on the hill gets a spruce up. Don't forget you can get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Anei a iwi mina pitipiti kōrero.
A mayoral relief fund of $200,000 has been set up for Levin after dozens of homes and businesses were affected by an apparent tornado this morning. 6 properties in Levin were severely damaged after a tornado ripped through the Horowhenua town. A freak fatal accident in Cambridge this morning has shocked people in the Waikato town. A woman died after being critically injured when she was pinned under a falling tree during wild weather. Ferries have returned to run after the high winds this afternoon in Auckland. The Harbour Bridge has also fully reopened, with all lanes free for drivers. Documents released by New Zealand On Air show it was concerned its funding of a film about Green MP Chloe Swarbrick could be perceived as political support for her. The funding of $200,000 for the film's production has been criticised by the ACT Party and others. Angry East Coast farmers descended on Napier today to protest against carbon forestry. They claim it's destroying their towns. The group of around 100 protesters left their placards on the steps of local MP Stuart Nash's office, who's also the forestry minister. A probable case of monkeypox has been identified in Australia after European and American authorities have confirmed cases. University of Otago virologist Gemma Geoghegan says the disease is usually not highly transmissible between people. Dr Geoghegan says that while New Zealand should be alert to the virus, the current vaccine should be strong enough to prevent a bigger outbreak. And 3 wards at Southland Hospital will remain closed to the public due to a COVID-19 outbreak. The medical, surgical and rehabilitation wards closed their doors to visitors earlier this week after 6 patients tested positive for COVID-19. Those are the headlines. We'll have news and weather for you at 6.
Kia ora rā, e hoa, no mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa i nai ko Nona Peltier, who is in the studio to talk all things business. Let's talk about retirement village operators. They're making big bucks. That doesn't surprise me, actually. What are the numbers?
Yeah, so we've got 2 that reported today. One was Ryman Healthcare, which is the biggest. Yeah. They had a net profit rise of 64% to $693 million. Oh.
Is that because a bunch of us are getting older, or is that because the services are costing more?
Well, they own a lot of property, and they had a significant increase in the value of those properties. If we look at the underlying profit, it rose 14%. So that strips out those types of things to $255 million. That's still pretty hefty. Looking at a smaller but still retirement village and aged care operator is Oceania. And their underlying profit rose 16% to $77 million. So much smaller organization, but same business model. In both cases, Ryman have a huge pipeline of work underway. We talked to them about their margins and so on. They think that they're going to be able to hold where they're at in terms of resale value of existing units, plus the sale of new ones, because, of course, there's been a downturn in the housing market. That can affect village operators, too. For Oceania, we asked them a bit more about their aged care bit of their business. They've got, I think, 4,000 beds, but they said that's not nearly enough, and they were quite disappointed that the government didn't set aside any money for the aged care sector. They're thinking that it's an incredibly important part of our infrastructure. It does need more investment from a public purse. It can't just be private sector that looks after our older population.
And let's move on to wage growth, which, well, apparently won't necessarily leave more money in the pockets of taxpayers. Why is that?
We got this thing, it's called bracket creep. Tax bracket creep. So that's basically where, say, you're making, let's say an average salary, but you get a wage increase. A lot of people are getting wage increases, but that bumps you into a new tax bracket. You could end up paying more in tax, which basically erodes any of the gain you just received. It also ties in with what we call Tax Freedom Day. Well, people might wonder what that is, but it's a theoretical day beginning from January 1st to middle of the year, basically, when you've paid all your taxes and every other dollar you earn from here on in, theoretically, is your own. And Tax Freedom Day happens tomorrow, in theory. So it's a lot longer than it was in the past. It's an extra 10 days this year over last year. And it's getting longer, that creep. We're going back to the old days when we used to be heavily taxed. So taxes do take up a lot of our income. And tax bracket creep is one of the things that we have that's not addressed. In some countries, they have it inflation indexed.
Yes.
But we do not have that here.
Yeah, and it's a political hot potato, as you would know, Nona, and a cause for great conversation. What do you bring from the markets, Nona?
I bring some more positive news from the markets. The local top 50 index, it rose 0.5% today. That was a 60-point gain to 11,267. And that's partly because China seems to be trying to boost their own economy. That has a flow-on effect. The New Zealand dollar also had a stronger tone at 63.8 US cents, 90.9 Australian, and 51.3 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier there with business news. Now, if you live in Auckland and you were just joining us, Auckland Transport says all ferry services other than Pine Harbour are now back in service. Services had earlier been cancelled due to high winds, but Auckland Transport says it's still not safe for buses to cross the Harbour Bridge, so no buses crossing the Harbour Bridge. It's telling people to take the Western Line from Britomart to Henderson Station, then bus 120 to Constellation Bus Station. Take some snacks and a drink because I think it's going to be a long trip. Now, some buses are running that route, but there is heavy traffic, so it could be a long trip home. If you are doing that milk run home, let us know how it's going. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. So no buses at the moment going over the Harbour Bridge. Some Levin growers have taken an absolute pounding in today's hail and thunderstorm, with one likening the damage to a shotgun blast to the veggies. Locals describe a mini tornado hitting early this morning, ripping trees up, roofs off and sending debris, including a whole garage, flying. Met Service says over a period of about 6 hours this morning, there was around 12,000 lightning strikes around the Motu. Joining us now is John Murphy from Vegetables New Zealand. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora.
Have you been speaking to growers, and how did they fare after this morning's weather down Levin Way?
At Vegetables New Zealand we have been. It's actually been quite hard to get hold of them because they're in clean-up mode, but it sounds like it's been, the ones we have got hold of have told us of pretty widespread damage, and whereas 400 metres away, sometimes their crops are fine. In one location they've seen hail as deep as 15 centimetres.
Wow. So what kind of crops are we talking here, and how much does this part of the country contribute to our veggie supply?
You're talking about greens, broccoli, celery and cabbage. I've heard have been particularly affected. And the Hortofino is a key vegetable growing region for us, and so this will have an effect on national supplies, unfortunately. But we really need to talk to people next week and assess the damage properly before we can speak to how much.
I saw that potentially they supply up to about 20% of those kind of green crops. Would that sound about right? Because that's quite a lot.
That does sound about right. Again, it depends on things seasonally, but they're certainly a key part of the supply chain.
Are crops like that insured? What's the situation?
Most of the time they're not. Insurance is very expensive on these kind of crops, so while growers will have insurance on their plant and equipment, which they would have sustained damage to, and you've just heard about garages flying into the air and things like that, the crops themselves are at the mercy of the weather, unfortunately.
And John, what are you hearing about whether much can be saved?
We're not really there yet, but the thing that will be key is we're hearing a lot about seedlings and so forth, which affect crop going forward and what can be planted. So that will have a big effect.
So you mean like some of the growers supply the small plants, and if those are severely damaged, then you've got an ongoing supply issue potentially?
You have, and quite often they're in a glass house or a plastic house that allows them to grow better when they're smaller, and those have just been pulled to bits by the hail.
So I know people at home are going to want to know about this, John. We have been talking on and on about the cost of food, right? People are going to be worried that given this is a significant supply district, potentially what does it mean for the price?
Very difficult to tell, but it's worth noting that it's been very dry around Pukekohe as well, which is another key region of supply. So it doesn't seem very good on that front, but really it depends how other regions have stock coming on at the moment as well. So as I say, we really need to assess that next week, but it's a little bit disappointing because prices were easing. But we would of course say there is still good vegetables out there at good prices if you look for those that are on special, but today's news was a real kick in the shins for our growers, so it's really unfortunate.
Please excuse the pun. So with Pukekohe experiencing weather difficulties as well, different ones, and this area, you're potentially looking at the perfect storm. So how much more can other suppliers put into the system to fill the gap?
Well, what we were seeing is we're seeing good supplies coming on, so that may ease that a little bit. So hopefully that fills the gap nicely, and hopefully our growers are back on their feet quickly. We are pretty resilient, and so even talking to people today in Hortofino, they're talking about the crops that are still good there, and so they'll be doing everything they can to get them out, and they need to because that's how they still make money in their business and keep going.
Yeah, so let's assume for a second that the seedlings are all good, right? The better side of the story. The seedlings are all good. How long would it take them to turn around another crop of broccoli, celery or cabbage? And can they do it now?
I think once you have that kind of hail event, the fields that are hit are in a lot of trouble. And with a lot of these crops, they're grown on top of the ground and they're really not saleable once they get any kind of damage at all. It's actually something that happens from time to time, unfortunately, and hail's really the extreme end of it. So we really feel for them. I would point out that the growers I have talked to today are really feeling for the people in the community who have had damage to their houses, and so they can keep it in perspective. So.
Yeah, it's not a great time for everybody. Really appreciate you joining us, John. That's John Murphy from Vegetables New Zealand there. Pharmac's been given its biggest ever budget allowance, $191 million, but it falls well short of what patient advocates wanted. The drug buying agency would have needed around $400 million to clear its wait list, which has about 130 applications. And as Louise Tanuth reports, those with rare diseases are still fighting to even get a spot on the list.
Chantal Wedlake's 2-year-old daughter Zoe has spinal muscular atrophy and desperately needs the medication Spinraza to treat it. Yesterday's news wasn't what they were hoping for.
I felt sick and devastated, to be honest. I just don't believe the price tag should be put on a person's life, and there was so much funding put towards other things like scrapping cars and, more superficial things but that does not replace a life.
Without the medication, Zoe will eventually end up in a wheelchair. But with a cost of around $300,000 a year, it's out of reach.
Feels like we're kind of in limbo at the moment, not knowing what's going to happen day to day, not knowing when her condition could get worse. We don't know how much time we have.
Lydia Pereira is paying $6,000 a month for Quinlock to treat her terminal gastrointestinal stroma tumour. After many other failed treatments, this is the first that's working.
When we've initially talked about going on this treatment plan, it was more so just to give me a little bit more time, because I am at the end, pretty much at the end of the road. But what has actually happened is it's not only just stopping the tumours from growing, it's reducing them as well.
She's facing $36,000 in costs, which so far she's been funding through the generosity of others. But with the drug funded in Australia, she's now exploring that option.
I have a beautiful young family who I want to watch grow up. For me, it is always going to be an option. I just have to figure out a plan to get there and try and see how it could work.
Donna Evans was the first person in the country to be diagnosed with Pompe disease, which causes extreme muscle weakness and breathing problems that can lead to respiratory failure. She needs the medication Myozone, which she has to get funded through an Australian healthcare company. After years of campaigning to have it funded here, she's tired.
I've sat at parliamentary tables, I've sat at health select committee meetings in both governments, I've sat at the Māori health select committee, I've sat at the Māori arm of Pharmac. This new budget.
She's been medicated for the last 5 years, but says if she'd had access earlier, her quality of life now would be drastically better. Only 11 other people have the condition in New Zealand. Donna says rare diseases are at the bottom of Pharmac's list.
They've actually got to listen to people with rare diseases. Where will I see a difference in my life with part of that money? Yeah. Are they going to find the 12 of us? Honestly, probably not.
Pharmac's CEO Sarah Fitt insists they'll do all they can.
Sometimes the advantage with medicines for rare disorders is the numbers are quite small, so the actual impact on the budget is quite small. Some medicines might be reasonably not that expensive, but there might be huge numbers of patients take them, so we have to take all those into account. What's the actual impact on our budget going to be? We're looking at across the board at a wide range of medicines.
Since yesterday's announcement, Pharmac's issued 3 consultations. If successful, 15 new medications would become available from the 1st of July for conditions like cancer, multiple sclerosis and HIV, with no indication of where other medications are on the list or if they'll ever make it on. The next 2 years are looking extremely unknown for those still waiting.
Well, it has been a wild weather day in Auckland and it's making it a bit difficult for some people's commute home, impacting travel around the city. Of course, the Harbour Bridge, as we heard earlier, where our Nick Truebridge was. Well, actually, he's made it back to the studio in one piece and has the latest. Nick, bring us up to date. What's going on?
Yeah, almost got blown off the bridge there. It's pretty wild out there still. As I said, I think it was about 80k gusts on the bridge itself. So certainly strong winds. So the update. So most buses can head across the bridge now, but not double deckers.
Right.
So if you're on so it's kind of a bus lottery in a way, I suppose. If your bus over the bridge is a single decker, you're in luck. If it's a double decker, you're out of luck. And they're saying that's the buses that can't go over the bridge are still on diversions going around State Highway 16 and State Highway 18 as well. Now, this is important. The affected services, AT is saying, are NX1 and NX2, heading to Glenfield, Birkenhead and Beach Haven. Double-deckers will eventually return to the bridge once the wind dies down. Obviously, as well, we spoke earlier about one of these alternative transport routes that AT has mentioned, if your bus can't go over the bridge, is getting the train to Henderson.
So train from Britomart
to Henderson.
Right.
And then jumping off the train at Henderson and wobbling onto the bus and heading to Consolation Drive. They say that's 2 hours. Whether it is or not, we think it could be a little bit less, just judging by our sort of local knowledge of the route within Checkpoint. But that's what they're saying.
Yeah, so you're taking the long back way home to get over to the North Shore via Henderson,
that's
train
right.
and bus.
Yeah, that's right.
Your bus cannot go over the bridge, so no double deckers.
That's right, yeah. And dinner might be a little bit cold.
Thanks, Nick. Nick Truebridge there. Now, if you are taking one of those diversion routes, let us know how long it's taking. We're interested. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, especially the one where you go from Britomart to Hendo and then you get the bus. Let us know how it's working out for you. Pundits are tipping a hung parliament when voters hit the polls for the Australian federal election tomorrow. The Prime Minister, in the fight of his political life, has spent the final week of the campaign visiting marginal electorates. Many of the government seats are at real risk of falling to independents. Penny Sheffield reports from Sydney.
It's a balmy autumn evening in Sydney's eastern suburbs. The Royal Oak Hotel is filling up with suits, fresh from the city and thirsty for a Shiraz. Many are here to wind down, but some are just winding up. Right on cue, Wentworth Teal Independent candidate Allegra Spender walks in. She's flanked by an army of teal-coloured T-shirts, and she's offering free drinks for anyone who's attending her political rally. It's being held strategically right in the centre of the suits, and tonight she's speaking their language.
The community is pretty unconvinced, and I think frankly the community is a bit unconvinced at the moment with both what both parties are offering. They're saying, you know what, we're not that keen on either of them, and we don't really like the choices we've got.
Spender is one of the headliners in what's being called an independent movement this election. She's one of the candidates who are capitalising on voter anger towards the current coalition government and voter apathy towards the Labour opposition.
And I think we have to change the composition of Parliament, make no mistake. It's not going to happen, with the current Parliament as it is. And that's why, I've given up waiting for moderate Liberals, to grow a backbone and stand up for something that is that important to this community, because they're not going to do it.
In the Wentworth electorate, Spender is taking on the Liberals. This is Malcolm Turnbull's former electorate, and the seat is currently held by Dave Sharma, another Liberal. It's said to have the highest quota of Range Rovers in the country, yet Spender is campaigning here on climate change, and she's tipped to win.
And so that is about stopping fossil fuel subsidies, because we spend $10 billion a year subsidising fossil fuels. It is a colossal waste of money, and it is also irresponsible from an environmental point of view.
Spender is also campaigning on integrity, something Australians feel has been lacking in the Morrison government. Out on Sydney streets this morning, many still don't know how they'll be voting tomorrow.
Most people are really disengaged, and I think a lot of people just want it over.
Australians in general, I think, are pretty disillusioned with big party politics. It's going to be down to the wire, so I really don't know. But if you get 2 or 3 of the independents in power, I think they will hold a huge amount of power.
Then I think there's a lot of people who are just really happy with the status quo. So the quiet Australians that Scott Morrison likes to refer to. So we'll just have to see. It's going to be tight, I think.
It's this political lethargy, coupled with Australia's preferential voting system, that gives independents a genuine shot at attracting the centre and grabbing seats, and potentially holding the balance of power in the next parliament. They represent a different look to the two major parties. They're mostly women. They're well regarded for their professional careers outside of politics, and their voters are highly engaged.
This is not something we should be afraid of, having a minority government, and the major parties are doing everything they can to create fear in the community that Australia will grind to a halt if we have a minority government.
Labor and the coalition need 76 seats to win a majority government tomorrow. If neither get it, that's when the Independents, Greens and United parties will come into play. But with most Indies not saying which party they'll support, it's anyone's guess as to which way this election will go should it come down to them.
What I'm standing for is good government, and what I think I can bring as an independent is that I can continually stand up on the issues that matter.
Despite how Australians feel about voting, it is compulsory and no exceptions will be made for those affected by the recent Queensland floods. As a result, as many as 50% of voters have already chowed down on their democracy sausage and voted ahead of election day.
Meanwhile, a last-minute change to election rules that will allow all Aussies with COVID to cast their vote has staved off court action as the lucky country prepares to go to the polls tomorrow. But more than 3 million people have already made their choice and voted early. Prime Minister Scott Morrison is hoping to cling on to power, despite heavy criticism from within his own party and beyond, with the Deputy Prime Minister calling him a hypocrite. In the red corner is Labour's Anthony Albanese, one of Australia's longest-serving MPs. To break it all down for us is the ABC's Peter Ryan. Hi, Peter.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. You must be in the brace position. Tell us what's happened with this COVID court case and voters.
Well, it's interesting because COVID has changed all of our lives to a very big extent, and certainly when it comes down to elections now, the original rules meant that people who tested positive before Tuesday but did not apply for a postal vote couldn't vote over the telephone. But now the Australian Electoral Commission's had to intervene because this is a very big issue for democracy and has changed the rules so that those rules for people who can vote over the telephone rather than having to turn up at the voting booth or do a postal vote or, that's been changed now. So they'll be able to vote over the phone. And this was a very big issue that's come up over the last 24 to 36 hours. That's now all been resolved. Both major parties have really made big inroads, and the government, the caretaker government under Scott Morrison, have made the changes under regulation to ensure that people who have registered for COVID-19 will be able to cast their vote.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so when it comes to the big players, Scott Morrison, right, he's known for kind of salvaging things at the last minute, isn't he? But I was interested to see one political scientist say that he'll need to, quote, rise from the dead this time. Your thoughts?
Well, it's going to be a very big challenge. In the 2019 election, Scott Morrison won that election against all odds and declared that to be a miracle. Whether he can actually make that comeback this time, it's going to be very tight. The polls are showing that when people cast their official votes tomorrow, and remember, a lot of people have already voted, that it's going to be very close between Scott Morrison, the coalition leader, the Liberal leader, and Anthony Albanese, the Labor leader, the contender. And a lot of damage has been done to Scott Morrison, not just during the election campaign, but over the last few months about his credibility, his ability to tell the truth, his credibility with voters. And this is against Anthony Albanese, who's come up as the leader of the Labor Party from the left wing of the Labor Party. Normally leaders of the Labor Party come from the centre-right to get most of those votes. Whether or not Anthony Albanese will be able to capitalise on a government that's been in there for 10 years, perhaps looking a bit tired, but on the other hand have taken Australia through the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression through COVID-19. And once again, most of the campaigning has been about economic management. Who do you trust to lead Australia out of the economic crisis? And you take into account $1 trillion worth of debt at the moment and deficits as far as the eye can see. Who has the economic responsibility?
So, Anthony Albanese, on the other hand, right, you mentioned he was to the left of the party. He seems to be shuffling more towards the centre with a small target strategy. Could you mistake that for an invisibility strategy? I mean, where has he been?
Well, this is one of the big issues with Anthony Albanese. He does come from the left of the party. He does have a very good story to tell. He grew up in a housing commission flat with a single mother here in Sydney. Has worked hard, worked through the Labor Party, studied economics at the University of Sydney. Has been a lifetime Labor Party member. But whether or not he has the goods to be able to sell to the public that he has the economic credibility, the political credibility, the leadership, the toughness to make the very hard decisions. And as I mentioned before, Australia has approaching $1 trillion worth of debt from spending during the pandemic. But a lot of that spending was there before the pandemic that was built up under the coalition government. But very hard decisions are going to have to be made, including politically unpalatable decisions such as potentially raising the goods and services tax to pay down some of this debt. And remember, interest rates are rising around the world. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand has been on the front foot in raising interest rates, and this means that further down the track, that longer-term debt for highly leveraged governments, including Australia, is going to be becoming bigger, so that credit card bill is going to be becoming bigger. And right up before 2019 and that election, it was all about getting back into surplus, having a budget that's in the black. Will either government, will Labor be able to make those hard decisions to be able to, pull in that debt, pull in that deficit, and build the productivity in a world where economic growth is slowing and stagflation is one of the big buzzwords at the moment.
Good to talk to you, Peter. We're out of time. Very quickly, have you had your democracy sausage yet? Yes or no?
No, but I'm looking forward to having that democracy sausage tomorrow, very much so.
Great to talk to you. That's the ABC's Peter Ryan there. They get a sausage most times when they vote, a snag. I don't know why that is the case, but it is. A lot of you getting in touch about the transport situation. More on that after the news at 6.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Horowhenua Mayor Bernie Wandin says the wild weather that left a trail of destruction through Levin this morning struck the unsuspecting town with ferocious force. A tornado shattered windows and damaged buildings, leaving at least 10 homes uninhabitable. Mr Wandin told Checkpoint it's impossible to prepare for something like that.
It's incredible to see trees uprooted that have been on the ground for, many, many years, to see them suddenly lying around. My thoughts are obviously with those property owners that have been devastated by the impact on their homes.
Nick Thorne, who lives in Goldsmith Crescent, had his garden flattened, his shed torn off its foundations, and his carport and car damaged.
All of a sudden there was a terrific rumble outside. It was as though there was a thunderstorm right beside my window. I thought, what the heck's that? That was the wake-up call.
A mayoral relief fund has been set up for people affected by the tornado. The government and the Horowhenua District Council have each contributed $100,000. A fatal accident in Cambridge this morning has shocked people there. As wild weather tore through the town, a tree fell on a woman seeking shelter under it, critically injuring her. She died later in Waikato Hospital. Waipa District Council's Sally Sheedy says the 80-year-old oak pinned the woman down.
The tree recently had regular maintenance completed in early April, and we were unaware of there's no previous concerns had been raised around the tree. Subsequently, the arborists have inspected the tree and confirmed that the roots were healthy, but it doesn't detract from the fact that this is a dreadful freak accident.
Ferry services are back on in Auckland after some were cancelled because of high winds this afternoon. The Pine Harbour service is the only one still closed. The Harbour Bridge has also been fully reopened with all lanes free for drivers. The Green Party says it will keep pushing for free public transport. As part of the budget, the government's extended the fuel tax reduction and half-price public transport until August. Community service card holders will get half-price public transport permanently from here on. The Greens have long called for free public transport, and co-leader James Shaw says that will continue.
Yes, we want to go further than that, and we think that there's room to do that. We'll continue to push for that, but ultimately we're delighted that something that we've campaigned on for so long is now starting to happen.
Transport Minister Michael Wood says it would cost $250 million a year to make half-price public transport permanent for everyone. 3 wards at Southland Hospital will remain closed to the public because of a COVID-19 outbreak. The medical, surgical and rehabilitation wards closed their doors to visitors earlier this week after 6 patients tested positive for COVID-19. The Southern DHB says it's keeping restrictions tight in order to protect its vulnerable patients. About 15 have been transferred to Dunedin over the past 6 weeks. A Te Papa executive wants to highlight the fight many cultures are going through to get access to special objects locked away in museums. The International Committee of Museum has released a statement saying historic garments should not be worn by anybody, public or private. Te Papa's Audience and Insights Director, Puawai Cairns, responded by calling the post Eurocentric. She says she was shining a light on how many communities in the world want to interact with their artefacts.
Museums, of course, we want to hold on to these things so that other generations are able to enjoy them. But sometimes holding on to something and capturing it and preserving it away from touch or away from interaction means that you stop the cultural life of that object with its people.
A vintage cross has been stolen from a central Auckland Anglican church. Reverend Helen Jacoby of St Matthew in the City has posted images of the large high altar cross, and CCTV images showing a person carrying it. She says the cross was stolen last Friday at about 3:10.
And unfortunately, no one was in the church. Someone walked in straight up to the high altar, picked up the brass cross, which is very heavy, struggled it out the door, and we haven't seen it since. And we would love it back.
Helen Jacoby says the cross dates back to at least 1905. And Pakistan's government has banned the import of a range of what it calls non-essential luxury goods as part of an emergency economic plan. The goods include cars, mobile phones and household appliances. The Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, says the ban will save the country precious foreign exchange. The Pakistani rupee has slumped to an historic low. That's the news.
And I look and I see it is still out there. Off in the distance. Calm down. I'm tired. Calm down. Get away. Calm down. You're still asleep.
That's Barney Hill in a hypnosis session that forms the backdrop to artist Joe Merrill's project as part of the Dowse Gallery's current exhibition on UFOs, aliens and other unexplained phenomena. The senior curator of the Dowse, Dr. Chelsea Nichols, is with us. Kia ora, good evening, Chelsea.
Hi there, Karen. Thanks for having me.
That's very compelling, disturbing actually. Barney sounds genuinely terrified. Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. From Northland to Kapiti Coast, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers with scattered thunderstorms in the north and west, easing this evening. Gales in exposed places in these regions and also for Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. A few showers in Te Tairāwhiti as well, clearing this evening and becoming fine. Wellington and Wairarapa, showers, some heavy with hail, clearing by this evening. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from a possible shower around midday. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, showers, some heavy with hail, becoming fine in Westland tomorrow. Scattered showers for Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Central and North Otago. Some will be heavy, clearing from the south this afternoon and evening. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from 1 or 2 showers. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, showers, some heavy with hail. There's snow to about 500 metres. And for the Chatham Islands, showers with possible thunderstorms from this evening with a gale southwest change. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 6. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint.
Ngā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Thousands of lightning strikes, reports of tornadoes, freakishly high winds and hail the size of golf balls. For some, it was a frightening and tragic start to Friday. A woman has died after being hit by a falling tree in Cambridge while she was trying to shelter from a flash storm. And Levin locals were rocked by what they describe as a tornado that literally ripped through parts of the town. Well, joining us now to explain what's been happening weather-wise is Met Service expert meteorologist Levin Das. Hi, Levin.
Hi.
What's going on here?
Yes, as you have explained, it has been a day of strong winds, heavy rain, thunderstorms, hail, and snow affecting many parts of the country. We had a line of thunderstorms that moved over Kapiti in Horowhenua around 6 to 6:30 this morning. There was an embedded severe thunderstorm cell which passed very close to Levin. And one of our weather stations over there recorded a gust of about 140 kilometres per hour.
140 k's an hour?
Yes, that's quite extreme. While we haven't seen any video footage of a funnel cloud, there's plenty of wind-related damage, which could be consistent with a tornado. However, this can also be a straight wind gust out of a collapsing thunderstorm cell.
So, ultimately, how will you tell? Do you need to see video of the event?
We need to go back and reanalyze the situation and look at all the radar imagery and radar signatures to investigate this failure and see if there are evidences of tornadoes embedded in this.
Okay, so there were also incidents in Cambridge and, as you said, other areas. Are these all connected or are they separate events?
Yes, this band of heavy showers, thunderstorms and hail continued to move northwards across the North Island during the rest of the morning. And this produced around 12,000 lightning strikes in about 6 hours up to midday across New Zealand and surrounding coastal areas. So this is all connected to the main sort of thunderstorm band.
And so where's it gone? And is there any more coming?
This is gone. This thunderstorm band is moving across the country, and it should be gone tomorrow. While this was happening today, we also had a cold wintry south to southwest flow moving up the country, and this brought snow down to lower levels across the lower South Island. So snow was reported to about 200 meters in Clinton, so that's in Clutha, and about 350 millimeters in inland Canterbury near Hororata and Rakaya Gorge. So all of this, the snow showers are slowly spreading northwards across the country, while the thunderstorms are pushing away to the north.
Were you expecting this, and were you expecting it to be as severe as it was?
There was a high risk of thunderstorm with gusts up to 100 kilometers per hour covering all the areas that were affected. This was in our thunderstorm outlook, and there was also an indication of severe thunderstorm within that as well.
So it was on the cards. You saw it coming and you put out a warning.
Yeah, there was thunderstorm, high risk of thunderstorm in the outlook. We also issued a thunderstorm watch for the northern parts of the North Island this morning.
One other thing before you head off, because commuters in Auckland, some of them are struggling to get home. High winds have caused some problems on the bridge, and not all the traffic can go over it at the moment. Is that going to move on pretty quickly? We have another round of wind watch covering most of many parts of the North Island and also parts of the lower South Island. So we're still expecting strong to gale force winds for many places, with the possibility of severe gale west to southwest winds as well. So, and this is expected to continue through to the weekend and gradually ease from late Sunday onwards. Oh, you just blew the weekend for us, didn't you, Ravine? Hey, really appreciate your insights there. Thank you so much for joining us. That is Ravine Das, who's the Met Services expert meteorologist. So, more wind headed our way for potentially almost all the weekend. Yay. A group of angry East Coast farmers descended on Napier today to protest against carbon forestry destroying their towns. They left their placards on the steps of local MP Stuart Nash's office, who's also the forestry minister. But as our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen reports, the minister was a no-show.
Sophie Stoddart is a 14-year-old from Porangaho, right at the southern end of Hawke's Bay. With the enemy, a pine needle in hand, she speaks passionately and says carbon farming could easily ruin her small town.
Our neighbouring farm has just gone into pines just a couple months ago. And it was quite heartbreaking to see it go.
She says it's absolutely tragic for towns like hers.
Porangaho is like a really small rural community, and it just won't run well because farms provide everything for us at Porangaho. And it's just a really special place, and with there's pine trees all around us, just no point in no schools, and most of us are all farm kids.
Protest organiser Sheena Watson is from Wairoa. She says nearly 100 protesters gathered in Napier to fight what's happening all over the wider region.
We're just worried about the future of rural New Zealand, with the communities, the schools, the small towns, all the staff on the farms. So much land is going into pines for carbon forestry.
She says carbon forestry is taking over productive land.
A lot of that land is actually good quality farmland, which produces a lot of the quality breeding stock, which is what New Zealand's fattening farms fatten for our meat industry.
And that's bad for a town like Wairoa, which is getting smaller and losing services like banks and dentists. Gisborne District Councillor Kerry Worsnop was also there. Last week, farmers up in Tairapiti presented a petition to MP Kiri Allen to express their anger on the sale of a station north of Gisborne to carbon farming.
We presented a petition to the Minister highlighting the very same issue, which is just the enormously disproportionate viability of planting trees on farms relative to farming farms, purely as a result of the emissions trading scheme.
Although the theory is trees will help offset carbon emissions for climate change, Kerry Worsnop says the problem is money's leaving the country.
Instead of exporting products, we're exporting money. That makes no sense at all.
Protesters left their placards on the steps of Stuart Nash's office in Napier's city centre. They read, "We can't eat carbon credits, save rural NZ, and wake up Jay and smell the pine needles." Despite that, Mr Nash isn't in Napier today. He's in Wellington for the budget debate. He says he doesn't want to see large tracts of productive farmland converted into forestry. And the government's just finished consulting on a new proposal to better manage carbon farming. It could see radiata pine barred from the emissions trading scheme.
It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now to Waimate, where a local icon has received a $500,000 makeover. The white horse on the hill above the South Canterbury town has been given a fresh coat of paint and is now surrounded by a series of paths and platforms to allow locals and visitors alike to enjoy the area's views. Our reporter Timothy Brown and camera operator Nathan McKinnon went along to the grand opening.
When most New Zealanders think of Waimate, they think of wallabies. But for the locals, it's a different kind of animal, bringing them pride. Waimate Together chair Rob Smith says the rejuvenation of Waimate's white horse has been a long time coming.
The white horse was originally put down in 1968, so quite a long time really, and there was always a vision up here to make it into a really nice park. Right from the start it was actually donated by a local farmer, this land, so you could argue that it's been close on 50 years, 54 years.
The horse was constructed by retired farmer Norman Heyman and his wife Betty. He never sought council permission for the project, but it's now an icon of the town. His sons Wally and Noel were on hand yesterday to see the unveiling of the $600,000 redevelopment. The pair recalled the efforts of their parents to build the concrete monument while in retirement.
Mum lowered the blocks on a makeshift railway out of wood down to Dad. Yeah, so they put in a lot of hard work for somebody in their age at that stage. to have carried that down there and built that.
Norman got his inspiration after seeing a similar monument while visiting England. He wanted to pay tribute to the Clydesdale horses, which have been so instrumental in his farming life. But Noel says what's been completed by the community far exceeds his parents' wildest dreams. How things are today, how it's all ended up, that's the vision that they had when they started?
I would very much doubt that. I would say they put the horse there with the intention of the horse, and to have been given a park area here to have put it, and the amount of work that Waimati has put into it, I think is incredible.
Also unveiled were 10 po, one for each of the area's schools and local runanga. The children spoke about what Waimate and their po meant to them.
It represents the history of Makiki Quinn bricks from the flax mill, farming at the base, weaving the journey through to the modern day community.
The district's 500 children also paid homage to the area through song. And while yesterday was a celebration of the district's history, Mayor Craig Rowley says the investment also bodes well for the future.
We're booming, our house prices are going up, the population's increasing, the schools are getting greater numbers, so no, I think we've got a bright future.
Joe Sutherland, project manager of the White Horse development, says that was the point, to lay a building block for further investment.
It's the beginning of a great future. I think it's already been here, like we say. It's the White Horse is an icon for the town, and it's lovely to actually upgrade the park, and actually make it a lovely place now for people to come and visit.
There's plenty of evidence of that optimism in the town's centre, where historic buildings have been upgraded. There's plans for more, with the Category 2 Arcadia building, which dates back to the early 1900s, next.
And we'll put that story, the video version of it from Timothy and Nathan, up on our webpage. North Korea is facing a COVID crisis in an unvaccinated population. The country sealed its borders in 2020 to try and insulate itself from the pandemic. Its leadership has so far rejected outside medical support, but the severity of this crisis is still largely unknown to the outside world. CNN's Will Ripley reports.
The mood was triumphant, the crowd massive. Most people not wearing masks. At last month's military parade in Pyongyang, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un promised to protect his people from hostile forces like the U.S. Protection from the virus that would soon ravage his unvaccinated population? Non-existent. Weeks later, a devastating fever, believed to be undiagnosed COVID-19, infecting and killing some of Pyongyang's most privileged citizens.
The military parade was a super spreader event, and we know that they flew in citizens from across North Korea.
Some of those citizens from the Chinese border region, a place I visited 5 years ago. North Koreans are living a literal stone's throw away from the raging Omicron outbreak in China. Beijing pledged to help Pyongyang battle the outbreak. The Hermit Kingdom's hermetically sealed border apparently breached by the highly contagious variant. 2 years of pandemic isolation, 2 years of sacrifice, gone in one parade.
That's the perfect petri dish for this virus to spread. So I think that parade will go down in history as a very bad idea for North Korea.
A colossal miscalculation, and experts say the likely cause of North Korea's explosive outbreak. An unprecedented nationwide lockdown, skyrocketing infections and deaths, a dilapidated healthcare system on the verge of collapse, lacking even the most basic medicines and medical equipment. Millions of malnourished North Koreans at higher risk of severe infection.
I think it's going to test his leadership, certainly, and it's going to create some urgency for very creative storytelling in the North Korean propaganda apparatus.
North Korean propaganda, crucial to keeping the Kim family in power, even during times of crisis, like the deadly famine of the late 1990s. The Kims rule over a police state that relies on heavy surveillance, restricted movement, and brutal political prison camps.
They strengthened social controls because they had the fear that, if there is an outbreak, if there is a crisis, that was what happened in the 1990s, that, the police, the secret police, the military, they all went hungry.
Now, they're getting sick. State media says around 2 million fever cases in 1 week. A crisis of Kim's own creation, potentially devastating hardship for the North Korean people.
The Taliban in Afghanistan is now ordering all women anchoring TV shows to cover their faces while on air. It's leading many journalists to reconsider their hard-won futures. CNN's Christiane Amanpour reports.
For the past 5 months, Khatira Ahmadi has been anchoring the morning news on Tolo TV. But this might be the last time she can show her face on air. The morning editorial meeting starts with worried discussion about mandatory masking. Station director Kpolwak Sapai says he'd even considered just shutting down and leaving. But then he thought female staff who want to carry on anchoring with a mask can, while those who don't will get other jobs behind the scenes.
We will leave the last decision up to them. They will make their own decision.
And it's a tough decision for these women who braved the new Taliban regime to stay on the air, who've already adjusted their headscarves to hide their hair, and who now fear a steep slide back to the Middle Ages. Khatira says she's so stressed she couldn't even present her program properly.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden. They want women to be removed from the screen. They are afraid of an educated woman.
Across town, the Taliban government spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid was attending a meeting with local journalists to mark a slightly delayed World Press Freedom Day. We stopped him on the way in. You have said they have to wear a face mask if they're on television. Women. Why? It's advisory from the ministry, he says. But what does that mean? Is it compulsory? If it is said, they should wear it. It'll be implemented as it is in our religion too, says Mujahid. It is good if it's implemented. Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace. They're afraid that if they wear the mask, the next thing you will say is their voice cannot be heard publicly. What is your response to that? Like during COVID, he says, masks were mandatory. Women would only be wearing hijab or masks and they will continue their work. He seems to say that if women wear this, they can go to work. But the dress code edicts, like saying female university students must now wear black, not coloured headscarves, is an escalating war of nerves, and everyone fears where this will lead.
When the polls close in Western Australia on election night, it's usually clear who the winner will be. But in a sign of just how important the state might be, Prime Minister Scott Morrison is spending the day in Perth trying to shore up votes. The ABC's Isabel Musali spoke to voters in the marginal Liberal-held seat of Swan.
In the aptly named electorate, swans swim by as locals enjoy the view of Perth City. This off-duty police officer is one of them. But before Mark starts his run, I ask if he's decided who to vote for.
No, to be honest. I'll wait till the day and see how many pamphlets get thrown in my face. It'll be either Labour or Liberal, but definitely not Palmer or One Nation. Don't know. It's going to begin with L.
He says he's most influenced by how leaders present themselves and not issues like cost of living that's dominated much of the campaign.
Cost of living, has that ever changed? Like, I'm 42 years of age, and quite frankly, it's never changed, and everything's going up. So,
So you don't think politicians could fix that?
No, not at all. And that's a worldwide problem. It's not a country problem.
Just a few weeks ago, Labor made the unusual decision to launch its campaign in Perth. It's targeting the Liberal-held Perth seats of Swan, Pearce and Hasluck, while a Teal Independent wants the Liberal seat of Curtin. The Liberals, meanwhile, are also eyeing off Labor's seat of Cowan. So it's undecided voters that Prime Minister Scott Morrison needs to win over during a last-minute trip to the West.
It's just ticking the box, to be fair.
At the South Perth foreshore, I also come across Simone. She says the budget stands out as a key election issue. Why? Well...
Oh, sorry to laugh at this, but there's an ad on TV and it goes, there's a hole in your bucket, Dear Labour, there's a hole in your bucket.
But the ad hasn't worked on her. Simone's already voted for One Nation, but she's marked Labor second, admitting she'd be more than happy with a Labor government.
It's like with Albanese and Scott Morrison, it's just like they're always putting bad stuff up about him. Do you know what I mean?
So you think when you see that ad,
yeah,
you're not impressed?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Because
it's pulling the mickey.
On the other side of the electorate, planes and trucks pass one of Perth's industrial areas. It's rush hour at this lunch spot, and there's a stream of high-vis wearing workers.
I'll just vote how I vote every election. Labor.
This woman hasn't made up her mind yet, but knows she won't be voting for the Liberals.
Purely just over the COVID years, I feel like we've had the right support that we've needed in WA. I know it's hard to say what to do because we've never been in this kind of situation before, but yeah, I just feel like they haven't given it all the effort that they need to.
It may be that for some voters, the pandemic, which shaped so many lives over the past 2 years, could also touch tomorrow's election result.
Finally tonight, look carefully around Dublin, Ireland, and you'll see the harp everywhere. Not only is it the symbol of the country's pride, it's also the symbol of the country's most famous alcohol brand, Guinness. So who actually owns the rights to the emblem? CNN's Richard Quest pulled some strings to find out.
I'm not one to harp on about conflict, but in Ireland, the dispute over this musical instrument goes back hundreds of years.
The Brian Boru harp.
It's the famous Brian Boru harp, and it dates back to the 14th century. It serves as the inspiration for two beloved symbols of Ireland, the state emblem and the Guinness livery. Guinness claims they got to the trademark office first, registering the harp in 1876, a move which forced the Irish government to turn its official harp the other way round when the state was established half a century later. The current Taoiseach, not surprisingly, a master at political spin. I heard that Guinness trademarked the harp in a particular orientation, and now even the government has to have the other way round because Guinness has the trademark.
No, my understanding is it's the opposite way around. This government has the trademark and Guinness has to do it the other way. But it's a very good pint and it tastes very well. But if you really want an alternative, come to my city of Cork and have a pint of Murphy's.
Well, a lot of you getting in touch about transport, whether it should be free public transport. Free public transport is not good if there are no buses going where you need to go at the times you need to, says this listener. Excuse me. And someone else says on the subject of who pays for public transport, it's all got to be paid for. The real question is, should taxpayers cop the lot or should users contribute? That from Brad. And a point of clarification about the democracy sausage, you know, the snarler that Aussies get after they vote. Where is it? What were they telling me? That it is, yeah, here it is. It's the school and community groups doing barbecues. They sell the sausages to voters as a fundraiser, captive audience. That is all we've got time for. Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything on the program, don't forget you can check us out, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a fantastic weekend. Stay out of those high winds.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. In Cambridge, freak winds have been blamed for toppling a healthy oak tree, crushing a woman seeking shelter under it. She died later in Waikato Hospital. A mayoral relief fund has been set up for people affected by a tornado in Levin. The Green Party says it will keep pushing for free public transport after the government extended half-price public transport until August as part of the budget. And 3 wards at Southland Hospital will remain closed to visitors because of a COVID-19 outbreak. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow on Mapuna on RNZ National, the government's latest plans on climate change with Mike Smith from the Iwi Chairs Forum. Jacqueline Paul will tell us why she's off to the world's #1 university and will hit the high notes with opera singer Kawiti Waitford. That's on Mapuna tomorrow on RNZ National.
Kia ora, Julian. Good evening. Karen Hay with you on Nights. Coming up after 7, we've got an hour of music to celebrate New Zealand Music Month. I've put together a selection of tunes for you, most of them new, nothing last century, put it that way. That's Friday night's Sonic Tonic. But time now for Focus on Politics.